And it wasn't because the property was not a good one. It wasn't because I couldn't get the financing. It was because I have certain, check boxes. That is inherently the issue, is that it goes against my investing strategies where I do not agree with only banking on appreciation. And that's what this deal is.
Yeah.
Okay, on this episode, we're going to talk about Scott's favorite financing option, which is VTBs.
The old vendor take back. Yeah.
So why do you not like them?
Not that I don't like them. I mean, it makes sense. It's just that.
Let me rephrase. Why do you have, I don't know.
Well, like my experience with them is a lot of people think they're just going to come in as beginner investors and just start doing vendor takebacks.
Yeah.
They're just, especially in a hot market, like vendor takebacks a lot of times are a tool used by sellers, like when they can't sell a property.
Yeah.
A lot of times, not always.
Mm-hmm.
But most sellers that are selling right now they're generally looking to cash out. Like a vendor takeback is a pretty rare thing in our market. Maybe in bigger stuff, 50, 100 units, it's more common. Maybe in commercial or industrial, I don't know. But
I got an interesting take on that.
Yeah, definitely. So do you agree with that general assessment? Like if you're coming into the market looking for a duplex or fourplex in the hottest market of all time, like vendor takeback, like don't.
Yeah.
It's unlikely.
Yeah. So I'll give you a couple examples. So when I first started, people were doing them all the time. So
because they can't sell.
Yeah, because they couldn't sell, right? So you have a bunch of unqualified people that couldn't get financing, essentially.
That's a good point too.
And in order to offload property at the price that they wanted, and that's another thing too, right? A lot of times when sellers can't get the price that they want, they'll figure out creative ways how to get it, right?
Love it.
So typically one of the ways to get that price that they want is to do a VTB.
Yeah. Offer a vendor takeback.
Or they'll actually look for someone that they know they can take advantage of. Especially in, even in a hot market. I've actually seen VTBs in hot markets that were just like the purchase price was just fucking outrageous. So that's when you'll see that. Or the property's a piece of shit and they know it. So they'll offer creative financing to get the property done. So I every time I see a VTB option on a property, I'm like, okay, what the fuck's wrong with it?
In this market,
literally all the time.
If somebody's offering a VTB, either they're looking to make a dividend off you, basically like a monthly payment of a higher interest rate than you would pay normally at the bank, or there's something significantly wrong, or the market has changed and they can't sell it for some reason.
Yeah.
But in general, why would you offer vendor takeback? Yeah.
Now, I have come across a couple scenarios when the owner of the property was willing to do a VTB just because they actually did want the dividend every month. And, they were retiring or whatever, and they saw it as an extra,
Another thing too is tax deferral, right?
Yeah.
If you sell the property this year, you got to pay tax. If you VTB it.
Yeah, exactly.
You might want to dispose of it next year.
I think VTBs do have their place. Have you ever seen any scenarios where a VTB would probably work in a scenario like we're in right now? Or have you seen people being taken advantage of? Because I know a lot of people out there really promote the fact that like, oh, you can do a VTB and use no money, none of your own money and, other people's money and all that stuff. And you could be in a property for nothing and this and that.
There's one right now
where scenario where that is happening?
I know somebody's offering, that building on Ouellette there.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I think they're offering one there.
Is that right?
The agent had mentioned it to me.
Is that right, eh?
But that sat for a while, and I don't know the seller's situation, but very rarely do I see a VTB option. Pretty much never.
Yep.
Pretty much never.
So I do have some experience with that property. I was offered that property to do some private financing on it. To actually construct residential units in that building is going to be fairly expensive. And
do the numbers just not work there? Like what's they must
probably do work to some extent. I don't know. I don't have enough of I don't have enough in-depth info on that particular property, but I think the sellers are actually just hard up on the number that they want. And they'll probably get it in this type of market, but
eventually the market catches up.
It's a bit like it's going to take well into the, $1 million to actually renovate that property. And I think there's only 12 or, something like that units in that property. And it's going to be $1 million. I think they want like around $900,000 or $800,000. So you'll be into the property for $2 million at only, 12 or 14 or even 15 units. That's a big number for around here, especially where it's located on Olette. Like that's a tough sell to some extent. You know what I mean?
And
in the bar scene.
Year project probably. Like how long would that take?
Take a few years probably for sure. So I don't know. It's hard. That's a tough one. But yeah, so that would work in that kind of scenario. But is there any type of scenario where a VTB would say work for us versus, someone else? I do have a scenario where I was trying to get a property in Dallas. The loan assumption, there was a loan assumption on the property. So the property was $18 million and the loan assumption was $12.25 million. So the LTV on the property was not that favorable. So I did go back and I said, hey, I want to do a VTB on this. And I could get the deal done at your asking price if you do a VTB. And it wasn't because the property was not a good one. It wasn't because I couldn't get the financing. It was because I have certain, check boxes that I want to check.
What was the LTV then at that? So 18 million purchase price. You're assuming a $12 million loan. What's the? I
think it was something like around along the lines of like a 33%.
So you would have been into that property for 33%. You typically like to be at 25 max for
I typically when you get into like larger scale multifamily, you have to be able to accept the fact that you might have to put 30 down. You got to have a lot of the banks typically require a decent amount of skin in the game. But from my perspective, because I'm strong with the other businesses that I have, I'll request a higher LTV, whether I get it or not, because of the debt coverage service or the debt, the DCSR or whatever. It may not make sense for the banks. Like typically banks, I think like to see like a 1.4 debt coverage service ratio for, a 25 or a 75, 25 LTV. But so I went in there and I was like, listen, you got to close the gap, see if the vendor will take a VTB. But he didn't have enough, he renovated the property and he didn't have enough left over to do a VTB once he disposed of the property. So he was willing to do a VTB of like $1 million. So I went in, give me a $2 million VTB at the same rate that the bank's doing, right? He didn't do that. He came back with a $1 million VTB for 1 year at a rate of 8 to 12%, which is not possible. So at that point, it's a dead conversation at that point because the numbers stop working. So that is a scenario where the only scenario where I will do a VTB is if I do believe in the property and the seller is hung up on getting or hell-bent on getting their selling it or their asking price, or the LTV is not favorable. So in this scenario, even they renoed the building, completely gutted it, right? They just ended up getting into the building for too much, so they had to sell it for X. Not that the building wasn't worth that, but they were just, they didn't have the purchase price was just too much versus the loan that they had. So their LTV was a little bit out of whack for what I wanted to go in on, and for me to do the deal, I wanted to, somewhere around at least a 70-30. So even close the gap at 3, give me like a 3% LTV, but they wouldn't come down on the rate. So the deal blew up.
So can you explain how that would have lowered the debt service for anybody listening to this, right? Sorry, not the debt service, the amount of cash, loan evaluation.
Yeah. So the way that works is it reduces the amount of essentially down payment that you have to put into the property, thereby increasing your return because you have less money into it and the property.
Can you give us some rough actual numbers? Like how would that have affected the actual numbers there? Right?
Oh shit.
Purchase price, 16 million.
Yeah.
Loan, 12 million.
Yeah.
That means you have to put down X amount.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I don't have the number. I can get, what I'll do is I'll pop the numbers. Let me see if I can actually, for argument's sake, I'll see if I can get the numbers or location. And there's a trade-off here. This property with normal debt would probably be 25 million. Okay. Because of the area. Now he's taking a haircut because he's got some shit debt on it. 25 might be a stretch, but whatever. And I have long-term goals. So I know after that 8-year fucking period, I know that the value of this property just from sheer appreciation is going to skyrocket. And this property does have a return, albeit lower, and it does have a cash on cash return, again, albeit lower. I would still do this deal.
What are the actual cash?
Okay, so let's do the numbers on this. So if I could have gotten, so just as it sits, it is, it's a 5 point, okay, I'll just break it all down. So first year, cash on cash return is 5.11%, okay? Total rate of return first year, 34%. At a 5-year annualized rate of return is 23%. Cash on cash return, 5-year because of increases in rent, which is at, albeit rental increase only at 3%. This market's going to skyrocket above and beyond that, 7.74%. Now, the actual annual, now here's the thing, the actual cash on cash return, if you want to average it over the course of 5 years is, so this particular property has, at those numbers, a 5.11% cash on cash return first year, and first year total rate of return 34%, and obviously annualized rate of return first year 34%. So the property works. Okay. Now, I don't want to have to put down that much. Okay. Now, let's go do this. So if I wanted a VTB, let's cut this down to, say I wanted a $2 million VTB. At even the same rate, 5.2%. Let's see what that looks like now. So that's where the numbers start getting a little bit fucked up. Okay. So then, so the numbers start looking like, because it's, the rate is a fairly high rate for today's standards, and he's not coming down on price as much as I would have hoped because he can't, essentially. The cash on cash return starts coming in at 3.19%, okay? And the annualized rate of return first year is -4.
If you did a VTB, it would lower your returns?
It lowers the return.
Because of his high interest rate or what?
The high interest rate. Yeah, as well as it's going to chip away at the annualized rate of return because I'm not paying debt down.
Good point.
Okay, so that's where the deal starts blowing up, right? Would I still do this deal? Yeah, I would, because I already know that this market is going to explode. But this isn't something that I would go to market with and try to convince investors, because this in particular property essentially goes against what I actually believe in. I'm just so happen to be extremely bullish on the Knox Henderson Dallas submarket.
Yeah, isn't there like some big designer or something's doing a development right by there?
Yeah, so like the son of L'Oreal makeup company or whatever the fuck that company is like doing like big development right across the street. Yeah. For like literally they're selling off property for like a couple $1 million per unit. So that's the area that it's in. It's in like a super
yeah, so
like
if you're
exploding market.
If you're willing to take an 8-year time frame,
what you could do on this particular property is I only have the rental increase at 3%. So let's say it actually increases by say 5% per year. What does that do to everything? So at that point there, now it bumps, like watch this. So now it bumps, cash on cash return doesn't necessarily get affected that much. Okay. So we're at still a 3.34% cash on cash return first year, but it does bump up annualized rate of return to 32%. You see what I mean? And that's more realistic. I just went in this conservatively. So, and that's also at the VTB. So if you knock the VTB out and go to 0 again, what's that look like now? The cash on cash return so the cash on cash return starts to get a little bit better, Yeah, I mean, you're back up to a 34 annualized rate of return. Again, cash on cash return, in the fives again. Mm-hmm. So, I typically like to be in an IRR scenario too, around 15%. First, this actually kind of hits it. So it's not a bad property.
So why would you not do it then?
The reason why I didn't do that deal, it's still kind of on the table, but the reason why I don't necessarily like that deal is because something like this it goes against my gut feeling of trying to, get a higher annualized rate of return and a higher total ROI based off equity paydown. I like that. But the reason why I'm a little conflicted on this is because I know that this property will appreciate faster than paying down equity. Yeah, that's what I have an issue with on this property. Yeah, and that's why I'm still interested.
You would go for 8 years without paying any debt off.
You would go 8 years without paying any debt, but I guarantee you every single year that property is appreciating like at least 10%. So when you're making $2 million a year.
Understandable.
Guaranteed. Yeah.
Now there is with that there's an elevated level of risk, right? You're banking
of course, and that's
on appreciation,
and that is why that is inherently the issue, is that it goes against my investing strategies where I do not agree with only banking on appreciation, and that's what this deal is.
Yeah, and maybe one or two properties in your portfolio you're willing to do that with. You do have a nice portfolio, like you could probably digest this and bake in a worst case scenario. I don't mind taking a gamble on a couple properties, but like. You can't build, our point here is you don't build your portfolio on risky stuff, right?
No.
Whether or not you decided to do this, you're fully aware of the risks.
Yeah. So that exactly, and that's where this property starts to come into issue, is that even at a disposition, from a perspective of disposition in 8 years, if somebody comes in and throws new debt on that building, it's 109 units. I mean.
Yeah, because you should run a scenario where it's like, okay, what debt would you normally get on this?
Right now, you'd probably be able to throw like a low 3% rate on that. You'd probably throw agency debt on that.
So if you knock the interest rate down 2.5%.
Yeah, you want to do that? Not. It wouldn't be 2.5. So this is in the U.S. obviously, and the U.S. isn't as low as Canada is. So So you want to see what this man. This is why I'll show you what if you had a first position mortgage on it for, say, 25% LTV. What would that be? What's 25% of 18? I can't even do that. $4.5 million. So if you threw 4.5% at, like, I just got quoted at 310 for new debt from Freddie Mac, 30 years. So if you threw new debt on this property, all right, and it was at 3.1% versus the 5.25 interest only, the new debt is 3.10, amortized over 30 years. Cash on cash return is 15.29% first year, and total ROI first year is 78%.
So when you go to sell this
total IRR, total return on investment year 5, 280%.
So
annualized rate of return fifth year, 56%. Cap rate, probably an average of 6.
So that's what you would probably be looking at when you went to sell this building in 8 years.
Yeah. So if the rates, which who knows what's going to happen with the rates. So now what you do is go backwards, right? So say at 25 million. Let's even start at 30 million. You start at 30 million and do $25 down. Dave, you got to cut this, eh? So at a $30 million price tag, okay, so say for example, in 8 years, at a $30 million price tag with 25% down, which is $7.5 million, okay, 3.10% rate for 30 years, you're at a 7.2% cash on cash return first year. It's not even averaged over 5 years. And you're at an average. So this is where the total ROI, it drops. Now you're at first year 5%, but you're at an average of like, what is the average here? You're at an average of like 50% over 5 years. And then annualized ROI, you're at about 15%.
That building would be a monster.
Yeah. So you see what I mean? So that's why I'm like so conflicted with this. And like rent is rent in that area is not even increasing at only 5. It's actually increasing at like 10 right now. So, you know, it's an animal. The building's like literally an animal. So that's why I have such a hard time with this property.
See the struggle.
Yeah. So this is why, but it goes against the fact that like me investing based off of appreciation just goes against everything I believe. But that's not to say that once you become seasoned, you can't do that, because many seasoned investors make way more money doing that. But you have to be seasoned, because if that doesn't happen, you have to be able to weather the storm.
Yeah, you better, if stuff goes the other way, better be prepared to weather the storm.
Exactly, and that's the problem, right? So,
yeah, cool. So I guess like, you know, in sum, the VTB it's an interesting option. Don't come in and try to use it as a crutch, right? Especially as a beginner investor.
Yeah.
In a super hot market, it's rare.
And it's rare, and it's going to be rare for a reason in a super hot market.
Because they can get what they want anyway.
Exactly. They get what they want. And if you do see VTBs in a hot market, it's probably a red flag. Not to say that it wouldn't work, but you need to do a little bit more digging.
Definitely. Yeah. Love it.
Done.
Trigger.